All right, welcome back. So what we're going to be looking at now is that more than one transformation can be applied to a linear function, right? We talked about three. We talked about translations, rotations, and reflections. So there's three of them. And so all of those three can happen at the same time. And so remember, if we're talking about translations, right? Translations, what do we look at? We look at the y-intercept, and if the y-intercept changes, we know that we're dealing with a translation, okay? What's the other thing? The rotations, right? What do we look at when we're talking about a rotation? We look at the slope, and if the slope gets bigger, it's more steep. If the slope gets smaller, it's less steep. And then the last thing are reflections. And what do we look at? How do we know it's reflection? Just by looking at the equation. Well, we know that the slope sign changes. And so if we have a negative slope and then the slope becomes positive, or if we have a positive slope and then we know that the slope becomes negative, then we're dealing with a reflection across the y-axis. So there's three. And so we're going to be looking at these now, three. Now we're going to describe these in a particular order. First, we are going to look at rotations first. Then we're going to look at reflections. And then we're going to look at translations. Okay, and that's kind of going to be the order that we're going to talk about multiple transformations. So if there's multiple things going on first we're going to rotate it, then we're going to reflect it, then we're going to translate it. All right, let's go for it. So let's look at our first example. So it says graph f of x equals x and g of x equals 2x minus 3. Then describe the transformations from the graph f of x to g of x. Okay, let's do this. There's a lot of stuff that's happening, right? This is totally different from this. What do you notice? I notice that the slope is different, so that means we're dealing with a rotation. And also the y-intercept is different, which means we're dealing with a translation. So let's go ahead and graph this f of x equals x first. So we know the y-intercept is 0. And, sorry about that. I hate when I bump it. And then the slope is up 1 over 1, right? So that is my parent function. That is what I'm starting with. Okay, it goes on and on both ways. This is my f of x equals x. Okay, so I know that just by looking at it, my slope is changing and my y-intercept. So I'm going to do the rotation first. So the only thing I'm going to do is do that rotation, and I'm going to call that h of x. So the next thing I'm going to do is, so f of x, I'm going to say f of x rotates, and this is the slope here is 1, and then it becomes 2, so it gets more steep. Rotates and gets more steep to become h of x, okay? And h of x equals 2x, right? So I'm just going to do like one thing at a time. So this is going to be my h of x. My h of x has a y-intercept of 0, and then the slope goes up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1. This is my y-intercept, so I'm going to graph this. So it's kind of like this step-by-step transformational process. So I do my rotation first. Okay, and that's h of x equals 2x. So this is the first thing that happened. Now I'm at h of x. So I started here and then it rotated, right? And then from here, now I have h of x equals 2x. So between 2x and g of x, the y-intercept here is 0. My slope is the same, right? But the y-intercept is here is 0, and then the y-intercept here is negative 3. So that y-intercept is changing. So I know that it's a translation. So then I'm going to say h of x. And if my y-intercept is 0 and this is negative 3, that means it's going to shift down 3 units. So h of x translates down 3 units and becomes g of x equals 2x minus 3. And so just trying to figure out what color to use. I want a different color. I guess I'll use this orange. Okay. And so, yeah, so this just shifts down 3. So my y-intercept is now 3, and my slope is 2 over 1. And you can see that those lines are parallel. So this is my, well, I don't think I kind of didn't do a very good job. It should be like right there, more like right there. Yeah, it should be more like that. We'll just make it a really big line, really thick. That always it always cleans up my mess ups. I just make it a little thicker. Okay, so this is g of x equals 2x minus 3. So there's actually 2 transformations that took place. We started here with f of x equals x. The first thing is that slope change, so that was a rotation. It got more steep. And then there was that translation, and it shifted down 3 units. So this is visually how you would write it. You show f of x to h of x to g of x, and this is how you write your answer here. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and look at the next examples. So we're going to describe the transformations from the graph f of x to the graph of g of x. So here we have our parent function again, right? So f of x equals x. So there's my y-intercept. Just going to go ahead and graph my f of x first. Okay, there we have it. I'm going to label that f of x equals x. And then what's happening from my f of x to g of x? Well, I noticed that my slope changed, right? My slope here is 1, my slope here is 4. And then also my y-intercept changed. It's 0 here and it's negative 2. So I have a rotation and I have a translation. So the order we're going to do this is we're going to do the rotations first and then the translations. So that means I need to go to h of x. So f of x is going to, f of x rotates, and if the slope is 1 and then it's 4, it's getting more steep. So f of x rotates and gets more steep to become h of x equals 4x. And I just changed that one thing, right? Do you see that? Do you see how my f of x where I started is just f of x equals x? And then I just changed that one thing of adding that rotation. Okay, so that's the first transformation that happens. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. My y-intercept is 0, and then it just goes up 4 over 1, down 4 over 1. I'm going to go ahead and graph that line. So this is my first transformation, is the rotation. So this line rotates this way and becomes that right there. Okay, so we start here. That's the first thing. Going to h of x equals 4x. Okay, then what happens from h of x to get g of x? Well, there is a translation, right? The y-intercept is different. So here the y-intercept is 0, and then it becomes negative 2. So from 0 to negative 2, that means it's shifting down 2 units. So we're going to say h of x translates down 2 units to become g of x equals 4x minus 2. And there we have our answer, and then we're just going to graph it. So g of x is right here. The y-intercept is 2, and the slope is 4 over 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1 right there. And you can see there, this is our g of x. And you can see, so we rotated there to h of x, and then h of x just shifted down 2 units to becoming g of x, okay? So that's how you describe multiple transformations. Let's go ahead and look at the next problem here. So what do we have? We have our parent function, f of x equals x, so I'm just going to graph that again. Y-intercept right here. Okay, this is what we're starting with. Okay, this is our f of x. The slope is 1. F of x equals x. Okay, and then it's translating here. Now this is different because it has a decimal. And I'm going to go ahead and change that decimal into a fraction just because I know that g of x is the same thing as 1/4 x. And it's going to be 0.25 is the same thing as 1/4. And it's going to be way easier to graph using a fraction than it is a decimal. Okay. So what's happening here? We have two things. The slope is changing and the y-intercept. This is 0 and then the y-intercept is 3. So we have two things again. So remember we have to do those rotations and then the translation. So we're going to rotate it first. So what's happening here? The slope is 1 and now it's 1/4. So that means f of x rotates and gets, what does it get? Does it get more steep or less steep? The number's 1 and then it becomes 1/4. So the number's getting smaller, so that means it's getting less steep and gets less steep to become h of x, which we just add in that 1/4 x and that's it. So that's the first step, okay? So let's go ahead and look at that. H of x 1/4, the y-intercept is 0. Right, and then up 1/4 would be right here. And let's go down 1/4 this way, right there. Okay, so this is our line. H of x. Okay, h of x equals 1/4 x. And you can totally tell, we start here and then it just gets less steep, right? So f of x goes to h of x. And then what happens? Then we have to deal with that translation piece, right? So from here, the h of x, this is where we're at now. The y-intercept is 0, and then it moves to g of x, which is 3, which means it's going to translate up 3 units. So the second thing is that h of x translates up 3 units to become g of x, which is, and I'm going to use the original equation there, 0.25x plus 3. So then we're just going to graph it. But when I graph it, I'm going to use this because graphing with 1/4 is way easier than graphing with a decimal. So the y-intercept is 3, and then up 1/4. And down 1/4. We have it right there. Okay, so that is our g of x. And perfect, there we have it. We started at the parent function. The parent function got less steep, and then it shifted up 3 units. All right, and you can kind of see that 1, 2, 3, it shifted up 3. From here, 1, 2, 3, it shifted up 3. From here, 1, 2, 3, it shifted up 3. So up 3 units. So very cool, that's how you write your answer. So this is dealing with multiple transformations. All right, let's look at the next example. Okay, this looks like fun. Let's see. Describe the transformations from the graph of f of x to g of x. Okay, so you start here and then you go here. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and try this out on your own, okay? So go ahead, just 10 only try 10. Pause your device. Actually, go for it, 10 and 11. All right, go ahead and try 10 and 11 on your own. So pause your device. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did. So we are translating from f of x to g of x. So what's happening? I see that the slope is changing. It's at 2 and then it becomes 1, right? And I also see that the y-intercept is changing. It goes from 0 to 8. So remember, when we're talking about the order of transformations, we need to talk about the rotations first and then the translations. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start at f of x. So f of x, this is the first thing, rotates, right? And gets, what does it do? Does it get more steep or less steep? So if we start at 2 and then the slope becomes 1, the 2 is bigger than 1, so 2 is getting smaller, so that means it gets less steep. So f of x rotates and gets less steep, becoming, and we're only going to do that one thing, which is the rotation, h of x equals x. Okay, so it rotates and becomes less steep. So we're at 2x, and then it rotates and gets less steep to x. You know what I forgot? I forgot to draw in the parent function, so we'll do that now. Okay, so the y-intercept is 0, and the slope is up 2 over 1. Okay, and down 2 over 1 right there. And this is f of x equals 2x. And then we're going to draw in that h of x. The y-intercept is 0. The slope is 1 over 1. Wait, which would be like right here. Yeah. Okay. So this becomes h of x, and you can see that yes, this becomes, we start here at f of x and then it gets less steep, right, and becomes this line. So now we're at h of x equals x. And then what happens? The y-intercept here is 0, and then it shifts up to 8. So we're going to say h of x translates up 8 units and becomes g of x equals x plus 8. And that is our answer, and then we just need to graph this. So g of x starts at 8 and then goes up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. And we just graph that right like that. Okay, it looks pretty good. And you can see that from here it shifts up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And like here, it shifts up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It shifts up 8 units. All right. So yes, that's it. Just need to label this g of x equals x plus 8. So if your answer looks exactly like this and you wrote this down, great job. Let's go ahead and look at the next one and see how you did. So, ooh, I see a positive and negative. We're dealing with a reflection. So exciting. So what do I see? I see that we have a positive and negative, so we're dealing with a reflection, okay? But I also see that the slope is changing. The slope is 5, and then it becomes 1, so it's a rotation. So I'm going to look back at this order that says I need to do the rotation first and then the reflection. So let's go ahead and do that. So, let's graph this first. So f of x equals negative 5 over x. So the y-intercept is 0, and then we go down 5 and over 1. Opposite would be there. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that and then label it as f of x equals negative 5x. So we're going to do that rotation first, right? That means that the first thing is that f of x is going to rotate and become what's going to happen? So this is going to be negative 5, and then it's going to have to become negative 1, right? And so that means that the number, it's going to become less steep. So it's going to rotate and become less steep. Oh, that's not how you spell steep. And less steep into h of x equals negative x. Okay, so I'm keeping the negative. I'm not dealing with that reflection. I'm just dealing with 5 becoming 1, which needs to be here for that slope. That slope is 1. So the 5 needs to turn into a 1, right? Okay, so then I'm going to graph that, which the y-intercept is 0, and the slope is down 1 over 1. Okay, down 1 over 1, or the opposite. Okay, and so there's our line there, and this is our new h of x equals negative x. And you can see it became, this was really super steep, and it became less steep. But now what do we have to do? What's the difference between h of x and g of x? Well, we have to talk about that reflection. So then h of x, the second thing, equals negative x, is reflected across the y-axis. Why can I spell y-axis? Becoming g of x equals x, right? So this is a negative, and now it's just becoming a positive. And that's it. The y-intercept is 0. Now the slope is 1, up 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. And so there we have it. This is our g of x equals x. So we started here, it was rotated to h of x, and then h of x was reflected to g of x. So if you have this and this is your answer, yokurenkimashita, you did a wonderful job, and I will see you next time. If not, go ahead and fix your work so it looks exactly like mine. All right, see you later.